Marriage refers to a legally recognized relationship, usually involving economic, social, emotional, and sexual bonds, typically marked by some sort of ritual. All right. So, marriage is also, again, something that's socially constructed. The way that we practice marriage in the United States is unique to our society. Different societies around the world have different customs and expectations and laws pertaining to marriage. So being married is an achieved status that holds a significant amount of power in our society. For instance, being married, it comes with it a particular role set, right? So with any status, there's a role set, the expected behaviors that you're supposed to follow. Well, married people, at least in the context of the United States, are expected to regulate their sexual behavior. To an extent, people were expected to only have sexual and romantic relationships with their spouse once they get married. Married people are also expected to bear and raise children, and they're also expected to provide economic and social support for one another, meaning they'll likely share banking accounts, checking accounts, they might have joint credit cards, and then of course they'll be there for one another for emotional and psychological support. However, a lot of these roles associated with marriage have been shifting since marriage is something that's socially constructed, meaning we define the rules and parameters of marriage and married life in our society. A lot of these roles of marriage have been changing, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, specifically because my most recent research is about marriage, particularly pertaining to changes and trends in marriage related to gender and sexual inequality. So I'll speak more about these in just a little bit here. Our current society does not view these roles as being as important as society did in the past, which means the definition of marriage is also continuously being socially reconstructed. So just like we see that the nuclear family, which was the norm definitely in the 50s, 60s, going into the 70s, has steadily been on the decline, these kind of rigid rules associated with marriage, the idea that marriages are supposed to last a lifetime, that married people or married couples need to have children, etc., a lot of those norms are also being challenged and redefined as society continues to evolve. A number of studies have found, however, that there are a number of advantages to being married. One of those advantages is that married people typically have better psychological and emotional well-being in comparison to unmarried people. And a lot of the evidence backing that just kind of goes on, is based on the reality that when you're married, you kind of have this emotional support system that you typically spend a lot of time with. And in comparison to unmarried people who may be single, you may be lacking that emotional support system in place. For similar reasons, married people typically have better health outcomes than unmarried people. One specific indicator of this is that married people actually have a higher life expectancy than unmarried people. And this is especially true for married men, which is interesting. And if you think back to our discussion that we had on gender, a large reason why married men have higher life expectancies than unmarried men is because their wives are typically encouraging them, in man-woman couples, encouraging their husbands to go to the doctor, to seek medical treatment. Wives are actually scheduling doctor's appointments for their husbands to ensure that they're receiving preventative healthcare treatments to find things like heart disease and cancer ahead of time, which is actually allowing married men to live longer in comparison to unmarried men. So better psychological and physical health for married folks. Being married also, of course, comes with economic advantages. In current man-woman relationships, it's very common for both spouses to be in the employed workforce, whereas previously, like I said, with the nuclear family norm, it was only typical for the man to be in the paid workforce, for the woman to stay at home, raise the children, etc. But in today's society, it is far more common for both spouses in a relationship to be in the workforce, and therefore, if you're married, you have typically two incomes contributing to your household, which increases your socioeconomic status and definitely encourages upward social mobility for married people. And then lastly, married people often report higher levels of happiness in comparison to unmarried people. And this is most likely a result of the reality that we live in this society that has kind of romanticized marriage as being the norm or the desired life path for most people. So if a person remains unmarried for the majority or all of their life, they often feel like they're not meeting this social expectation, this norm in our society, right? And so as a result of not meeting that norm of being married, unmarried people often experience a lot of negative sanctions, right? If you see a 50 or 60-year-old person that's never been married their entire life, some people may look down upon that person or stigmatize them for deviating against the norm of being a married adult in our society, which is definitely what we're kind of socialized into. So let's talk about different types of relationships in the context of marriage. American culture largely practices monogamy, which is the practice of being in a relationship with one person at a time. However, a growing number of people are practicing what is referred to as polyamory, which is having consensual relationships with more than one person at once. So the big word in this definition here is consensual. Polyamory is not the same as cheating, right? So if you're in a relationship or you're married to one person and you're having an affair with another person on the side and your spouse or your significant other isn't aware of this extramarital or extra relationship affair that you're having, that is not the same thing as polyamory. Polyamorous relationships are consensual, meaning partners have agreed that they can have sexual relationship with other individuals or romantic relationships with other individuals outside of their dyad or outside of their person-to-person coupling. And this was actually a theme that I explored a lot, like I mentioned in my previous research, which was examining trends in marriage today, and I found a growing number of married couples are actually practicing polyamory. And when I was asking the individuals I was interviewing why they chose to practice polyamory within their relationships, particularly within their marriages, a lot of them gave evidence that they enjoyed the increased inclusivity of diverse family formations that polyamory offered them. So this is just a quote that I got from an individual who I'll call Evelyn that I interviewed, and Evelyn said, "I still don't feel like the traditional model of marriage is appropriate and allows for growth. I think the concept of two people being everything to each other for the rest of their lives and being the sole supporters of children, I just think it's so sparse, because when you get that little nuclear family, it's just down to the couple, and now the couple can divorce, so then the couple is down to one person with kids, and then it just gets more and more where it's like very isolating. My hope for polyamory was that it would be connected. It would add connection to people." Delilah, another person in a polyamorous relationship, said something similar. She explained, "I mean, it's kind of a polyutopia type thing," explaining her current relationship. "Everybody's getting along and able to be in the same room together. Yeah, if we're able to allow our children to be part of that, that's fantastic. Daddy's got 2 girlfriends, mommy's got 2 boyfriends, I've got an extra brother. All right, why hide it? We're all happy." So in this instance, Delilah was talking about what her son said to them. Her son actually really enjoyed being able to play with the children of both Delilah and her husband's other significant others in polyamorous relationships, and it kind of resulted in them forming this extended family of choice, of fictive kin, these people that they weren't related to through blood or through marriage necessarily, but they had intimate bonds with them, and it allowed for a greater sense of community. And that's what a lot of the people that were practicing polyamory that I spoke with said they really liked about it, was that it just really extended families in ways that allowed to enable more relationships, a stronger sense of community, and really broke free of that nuclear family model, which, as Evelyn pointed out, she felt was really narrow and restricted. The idea that there is 2 parents and the children they have, and that's all that should be looking out for them. So many people praise polyamory for increasing inclusivity in terms of family formations. However, they also identified a number of challenges of practicing polyamorous relationships. And the main one of those was just finding time to juggle multiple relationships at once. As Delilah also said, we both work full time, so, carving out that time where we can be with our secondary partners, again, it takes a lot of communication, and making sure that we still feel that time to be with each other and with our son. Yeah, I mean, there's some juggling with schedules. Whitney felt something similar, saying it's definitely been a learning curve to kind of figure out how to manage, like, both of us. I have another partner, so figuring out how to have adequate time with Gloria and spend time with Chad, who is her husband, and spend time as a family and see my friends and have time by myself, like, finding that balance is very hard. And I think Teresa put it best by saying, the thing in poly is people always say it's not as sleazy as it sounds. It's mostly about Google calendars, right? So I think this quote from Teresa is really important here too, because a lot of times when people think of polyamorous or think of people having consensual non-monogamous relationships, there is this kind of stigma that it's just all about the sex, and that it's just really all about, kind of living out these sexualized fantasies of threesomes or orgies or what have you. And what I was really finding interviewing all these people practicing polyamory was that, yes, sex and sexual relationships were a big part of it, but the bigger part of it was just establishing these more intimate and romantic relationships relationships and to extend and diversify family formations was the goal of it. And the biggest challenge was that it was just hard. It was mostly about, Google Calendars, as Teresa put it, finding time to schedule time with your spouse and then with your secondary partners, with your children, with friends, still having some personal time for yourself was a difficult challenge a lot of polyamorous people faced. And I think a lot of that is because polyamorous relationships aren't really heavily normalized in our society, so there aren't really a lot of institutions or structures in place to facilitate polyamorous relationships yet. But I would anticipate that as polyamory continues to become more socially acceptable and more increasingly common in our society, we likely will start to see some structures being adapting, workforce, daycare, childcare, etc., to be more accommodating to polyamorous families. So a distinction from polyamory is polygamy. Now, polyamory is simply consensual, non-monogamous relationships with more than one person. Polygamy, however, specifically refers to the practice of having more than one spouse. Now, in the United States, this is not legal, so we don't see a lot of this, but there are still some people in the U.S. that practice polygamy. Even though they can't legally be married to more than one person, they consider themselves to have more than one spouse at kind of a cultural level. So polygamy, with an N, consists of one man with two or more women as spouses. Polyandry consists of a woman marrying two or more men. Polygamy is far more common in a lot more societies, simply because the majority of societies are based off of patriarchy, the system that privileges men in any given society, and so a lot of societies will allow men to have more than one spouse, but not allow women to have more than one spouse. Polygamy, like I said, is illegal in the United States, but it's estimated that 30 to 50,000 people practice polygamy in the U.S. today. Like I said, while we can't legally be married to more than one person, about 30 to 50,000 people, it's estimated, consider themselves married to more than one person, like I said, at a cultural level. So oftentimes in polygamous relationships, two people will legally get married because that's allowed, and then additional partners will come in and they will maybe have like a wedding ceremony, even though it's not legally recognized, but still just to kind of indoctrinate these new people into that marriage and to give them a sense of recognition. But it's important to note that only two people can legally be married in the United States, which means that any additional spouses beyond that don't get access to the legal benefits of marriage, which we'll cover in just a minute here. This is just a clip here from an interview from the popular TV show The Sister Wives. Maybe you've heard of it, which is about a polygamous family. It's one man who currently has 4 wives. So it's just an interview with them that asks some questions and provides more context. So if you're interested in this, I definitely would encourage you to click on that link. Again, it's provided in the slides, which are available on Blackboard. Let's also talk about same-sex marriage, another area that I researched very heavily in my last project. In 2015, same-gender marriage became legalized in the United States. So as of now, it is currently legal to have same-gender marriages in every state in the U.S. But prior to 2015, it was on a state-by-state basis. So some states legalized same-gender marriage before then. Other states allowed what were referred as civil unions, which were essentially kind of a public policy that was designed in some states, not in every state, that extended some of the benefits of marriage to partners who were not legally married. So same-gender couples in some states could apply for a civil union so they could access some of the legal benefits of marriage, including, you get tax breaks if you're married, you can have hospital visit rights if you're married to someone, it's easier to adopt children if you're legally married, and a lot of these rights, even though marriage is legal now for same-gender couples throughout the U.S., same-gender couples still face a lot of roadblocks. For example, some same-gender couples may still be denied the right to adopt children in certain states depending on where you live. You might be illegally recognized as a parent of your adopted child in one state, drive across a state border, and no longer be legally recognized as the parent of your child anymore, which makes marriage and family relationships for same-gender couples a really scary situation in the United States still. But like I said, marriage offers a lot of privileges to its constituency. There's estimated over 1,100 legal privileges and benefits associated with being married. So being denied access to those benefits definitely resulted in a lot of inequality for same-gender couples before the legalization of same-gender marriage. But like I said, even though same-gender marriage is legalized right now, same-gender couples and same-gender families still face a lot of challenges by a lot of laws that are still discriminatory in the U.S. Let's talk quickly about unmarried couples. Another trend in relationships is that people are choosing to postpone postpone marriage longer than they were in the past, and a lot of couples are never getting married. Instead, they're choosing to cohabitate, which is simply refers to living with a person without being married to them. Cohabitation used to be very stigmatized. It was kind of taboo, especially 50, 60 years ago during the upsurge of nuclear families. But again, it's one of those trends that's become a lot more increasingly socially acceptable for unmarried couples to live together today.